Saludos y bienvenidos a esta entrevista del Instituto Juan de Mariana con Reiner Zitelmann. Soy Diego Sánchez de la Cruz y vamos a presentar este libro que se llama En defensa del libre mercado. Reiner, welcome to Spain. As you know, people are dying to learn more of your new book. And one of the things that caught my attention is the position you take on monopolies. It is often argued that in capitalism tends to create monopolies. And you take another position. You say that, well, with competition, many of these monopolies are broken down. But monopolies are not necessarily a bad thing if they come as a result of competitive processes in the market. Can you elaborate a little bit?
So first of all, yes, it's true. Capitalism can lead to monopolies, and not every monopoly is bad. Even we learned it from Schumpeter, for example. But more important, capitalism destroys monopolies all the time. I'll give you some examples. Monopolies, they look much more powerful. Even people expect they will last forever when they are at the top of their power. For example, today, I think a lot of people can't imagine a world without Google or without Amazon or without Facebook, maybe. But I give you one example from the past. I have them in my book. In 2007, there was a headline in the leading UK newspaper Guardian. The headline was, "Will MySpace ever lose its monopoly?" If I have a lecture today and young people, MySpace haven't heard about it, but this time, will MySpace ever lose its monopoly? The same year, at the cover of Forbes magazine, the headline was, "Nokia, who will ever catch the cell phone king?" Today I ask people, hey, who used Nokia telephone? There are very few, maybe almost no one who used Nokia. Or in the United States, today, even you use the word Xeroxing sometimes if you make a photocopy. The reason is, in the 70s, Xerox had a market share of 95%. Today it's less than 2%. Or last example, Kodak cameras. They had 90% market share in the United States film market, 85% in the camera market, and then they
don't make cameras anymore.
Yes. Why? Because of capitalist innovation, competition. So yes, it's true, capitalism can lead to monopolies. But the crazy thing is, in this discussion about monopolies, you have a discussion with anti-capitalists about monopolies. Then they play, monopolies, they are so bad. Half hour later, in the discussion, they make a suggestion, we should nationalize some banks, or we should nationalize some energy companies. Hey, but what's this? This is a monopoly, and this is the only monopoly that is very hard to get rid of, yes. The state monopoly. So in one moment they are against monopolies, in the next moment they are pro-state monopoly.
You're absolutely right. And one thing that's very interesting here is that there is this take on some companies as being, monolithically on top. And then when we talk about the rich and inequality, there's always this idea that there is growing inequality under capitalism. But there is a big issue here, and you bring it up in your book, is that when we're talking about the 1%, when we're talking about those at the top of the economy, it's not necessarily the same people today than they were 20, 40 years ago. And that's a position I think we really need to take, that there's a lot of mobility within a market economy.
Yes, if you look at the list of the richest people 50 years ago, or families or 30 years ago, or 20 years ago, 10 years ago, it's a lot of changing. Of course, there are some you find to a lot of years, like Warren Buffett is an example, or Bill Gates, but there are others new, others they will come down. These are not the same people, but there's something more important with the question of inequality. I care about poverty, I don't care about inequalities. These are two very different questions. I'll give you one example. In China, in the end of the 50s, 45 million people died as a result of Mao's Great Leap Forward, the biggest socialist experiment in history. And even in 1981, 88% of people in China lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's less than 1%. But inequality, of course, it's bigger today than it was in socialist times, in Mao times. Today, you have 700 billionaires in China. It's the same number as the United States. Even in Beijing, there live more billionaires than in New York City today. So inequality is bigger, but I found no one when I was in China. They, okay, let's go back to Mao's time because we were all equal, all poor, and this is better. No, I think inequality is a topic really for envious people. They don't care about how to improve their own situation, but their priorities, how can we tear someone down, maybe to tax him. I give you maybe example that my thesis is that even people who are envious harm themselves. We'll give you one example. Think about Jeff Bezos. I mentioned him. He's one of the richest people in the world today with Amazon. Some years ago, there were protesters in front of his mansion in Washington, D.C. They positioned a guillotine in front of his house to show what they like to do with rich people. So these were these envious people. Then we have someone else maybe who ordered a book on Amazon about the life of Jeff Bezos and start, what can I learn from him? How can I, maybe not to become as rich as he, this is unlikely, but can I take some lessons how to improve my situation? And now think about 10 years later, what do you think who's more successful? The people who built there at their house, there's a guillotine and position it, or the one who ordered the book about Jeff Bezos' biography? What can we learn from him?
And that's a very interesting point that is a common thread through your books, which is you do believe in the power of the individual. You do believe in the power of people to help themselves and lift themselves up. You yourself, you have created a successful business career, and originally you were a researcher, let's say, an intellectual. So what's the common thread that you would leave our audience with, in the sense that everybody has it much better today than we've ever had it, in terms of putting in the work, trying to get by, and just getting over under a capitalist system, which gives more opportunity?
I think, yes, it's so important you spoke about the philosophy, because there's a philosophy there behind it. It's about you. It's about don't blame capitalism, don't feel like a victim, don't blame other people, and don't expect everything from the government. I tell you a funny story. I was in Argentina, and in Argentina they have all this, or they had all this attitude, I want to have everything for free from the government. Now it's changing. There's a huge libertarian movement, but this was about decades and decades, the mentality, even stronger than in Spain or in Germany. Yes. I want to get everything free from the government. And then I had a lecture in some cities in Argentina, and one lecture, there was a young man sitting in the first row. He wasn't really handsome, to be honest, so I asked him, hey, do you have a girlfriend? He said, no, I don't have. And I asked him, hey, would you like to have a really pretty, beautiful girlfriend? He said, oh, yes, he was smiling. And I asked him, what do you expect who will bring you this pretty, beautiful girlfriend? The government? The state? And he laughed, no, I don't believe it. And then I asked him, what do you think, who's responsible to get this beautiful girlfriend? He said, oh, I think that's me. Hey, you got it. It's not only with his girlfriend. It's with money. It's with everything.
Exactly.
It's on you. And this is, my philosophy. Don't feel like a victim. I wrote another book that is unfortunately not translated in Spanish language. It's about successful disabled people. And they could feel like a victim. For example, a friend of mine, he has no arms, but he's one of the most successful hornists in the world. He didn't blame external circumstances. Or I had an interview with Eric Weinmeier. Maybe you don't know his name, but this is an American. He is blind, and he climbed Mount Everest, but it was not enough. After climbing Mount Everest, he climbed the 7 summits, the 7 highest mountains in 7 continents, being blind. And he would have so much excuses for not being successful. I'm blind, maybe the state should do something for me and help me. No, he trusted in himself, in his own ability, and this is the philosophy of individual freedom, the philosophy of capitalism.
And it is uplifting, for sure, and inspiring. I must say that one of the great points of this book is that it includes a survey done in more than 20 countries that measures public opinion and social values around the economy. What do people think about capitalism, about socialism, about big companies, about inequality, about all of these relevant topics for the economy? And my question to you is, what are your main findings that we should take notes from and learn from here in Spain now that you know what Spaniards really think of capitalism?
Yes, we asked, this was, by the way, the biggest poll ever done in history about the image of market economy and capitalism now in 34 countries. It's an ongoing process. And we asked them more than 30 questions, or we confronted them with 33 different statements. Not only one question, do you like capitalism or not? There were a lot of questions about capitalism to find out what they really think about capitalist market economy. And the result is very negative. Only in 6 out of 34 countries there's a more pro-capitalist attitude. Poland, United States, Czech Republic, South Korea. Then we have some countries...
Which is the countries that keep growing.
Yes, and then we have some examples from countries that are in the middle, neutral. Then we have the biggest group. These are the countries where anti-capitalist attitude dominates. And unfortunately, one of these countries, I don't think that it comes to a surprise for you, is Spain. I think there were only 5 countries more anti-capitalist. Spain is a little bit similar than France, for example. And
we're not growing. That's a big difference.
But there was a big difference. This was a little bit different in Spain as in other countries. In most of the countries, it was this way that, of course, left-wing people are more anti-capitalist than right-wing people. But in some countries, the difference was not so big. In Spain, it's a huge, huge difference whether you are more left-leaning or more right. We did it this way. In addition to these 30 questions about capitalism, we asked everyone to position himself on a left-right scale. 0 means extreme left, 10 extreme right. And then we looked whether the left or right-leaning people are more pro-anti-capitalism. Of course, in most of the countries, it was that the left people are more anti-capitalist, but not in all. In Poland, for example, it was different, and in some other countries, the difference was not so big.
But here it was more pronounced.
A very pronounced difference. The left-leaning people were so extreme anti-capitalist, and even the moderate right were very much pro-capitalism, and the far right were also very much pro-capitalist. So this is an interesting result for Spain.
For sure. So I also want to pick your brains on the ongoing situation of the Chinese economy, because you are very knowledgeable of it. You've released many of your books, not just in China, but around the Asian market. And at the end of the day, the big, setback for capitalism globally in the last several years is that not only is the West retreating part of its economic freedom, is that countries like China, which were advancing and sharing some drops of capitalism throughout its very intervened economy, they have taken a lot of steps back, and the pandemic has only exacerbated this trend. So I guess we can be a bit pessimistic about the evolution of the market economy in China, can't we?
Absolutely, I have to agree. And in my book, you can read one chapter. I love it very much, from Wang Chang, is a friend of mine from Beijing University. Of course, he can't criticize so open.
Yes.
But if you read
between the lines.
If you read between the lines, you see he's very much he's on our page. He's pro-market, pro-high, pro-Mises, and I had a lot of discussion with him. A lot of people don't understand what happened in China in the last decades. His very most important point is what he says always in every conversation with me. We became successful not because of the state, but in spite of the state. We came from like 100% state, and then we introduced private property, pro-market reforms. Of course, the state is influential in China today, but the progress was not because of state-owned companies, but because of a lot of these private-owned companies. This was the reason why China became successful. In the West, they don't understand it. They think, China became successful as a third way between capitalism and socialism, or there's a special China model with a strong state. Forget it, it's wrong. The problem is that now even the government in China start to believe the same thing, and they go back to more state, and this will not be only harmful for China if they go on this way, but of course harmful for the whole world. If you look at us, in Germany, we depend totally on China. We sell much more cars in China than we sell inside Germany. And this is a big problem. This is the reason why I wrote this book. Capitalism is everywhere in the world now in a very bad position. Let's start with Latin America. Latin America, even in Chile, who was such a successful and country, the most economically free country in Latin America, they voted for socialist. I think now, in the meantime, they changed their mind, and this socialist constitution was rejected, and now they voted. So, but I think they understood that. But even there, they have a socialist. In Latin America, now Lula, in Colombia, not to talk about Venezuela, it's almost everywhere in Latin America. Then go to the United States, Joe Biden, Green New Deal, his politics, even Trump, yes, in a way he did some good things with deregulation and lowering taxes, but also he was very protectionist and he was not an advocate of free market economy, of course. And by the way, in the Index of Economic Freedom, this ranking by the Heritage Foundation every year, United States have now the worst ranking than they started the index in 1995. The same with UK, by the way, the worst ranking. And when I have these interviews in the United States, I tell them always something that comes to a shock for them. Here, look at the Index of Economic Freedom. There are 16 European countries today, according to this index, that are more economically free than the United States. Believe it or not, 16 European countries. And this is not because we are so economically free. On the contrary, look what they do in Brussels there, for example. They forbid the combustion engine and these things. I can talk a lot about what happens in Germany. We go more and more in the direction of a planned economy. So if you look, even in a country like Poland, and I admire a lot Poland because they are Europe's growth champions since decades, and it's amazing what they did there. But now, since 2015, with this Peace Party, they call them conservative or right-wing. Maybe they are right-wing as far as it comes to family or nation or these things, but in the economies and social policies, they are very left-leaning, and they stopped privatization. They even nationalized some more banks. So almost everywhere in the world where you look, and this is of course a little bit depressing, and maybe one example, positive example, is Vietnam. They call themselves a socialist country with a communist party, but I was there, and I guarantee you it's easier to find a Marxist in Spain than to find a Marxist at a university in Vietnam. I give you one funny example. They invited me there at 4 different universities in Vietnam, and the most prestigious university, Foreign Trade University, they invited me for a workshop. And the topic of the workshop was, how can we improve image of rich people? Can you imagine a workshop here at the university with this topic, how can we improve image of rich people?
That's great. It seems like Vietnam is indeed getting a lot of things right, and we're getting a lot of things wrong. So, one final question: this book, why should people get it? Because you know what? There's an amazing quote by Steve Forbes that says that this is one of the best books that's been written in the last several decades in defense of the free market. I think that by itself, it's enough to sell this book. But I mean, it's your product and it's your audience, so why should people get a hold of En Defensa del Libre Mercado?
First of all, a journalist in the United States asked me 2 weeks ago whether I believe I can convince anti-capitalists. And my answer was no. And he was a little bit surprised because he said, hey, why do you write a book when you don't believe you can convince other people? That is because I know it. They will not buy the book. They will not read the book. It's true. I know them. They don't like to read books with different opinions. I do it. If you look at the bibliography, you see a lot of books from Marx, Piketty, and all this.
You've read it all.
I read books from people who think different, but they are afraid. They have fear. Maybe, it's like with a cult, so they have fear to read something different opinion. They are not sure about their position. No, I wrote it for people who are pro-free market economy, pro-capitalism, to provide with all the facts. Because, for you, this book, if you look at the bibliography, I used 360 scientific books and papers. Not everyone has time or love to read 360 books and scientific papers. I did it. And you find 900 footnotes for all, the testimonies for all this. So I wrote it for people who are maybe sometimes they have some arguments, but they want more. Maybe you have a discussion about capitalism is responsible for wars, or capitalism is responsible for
climate change,
for climate change,
inequality, exactly.
Hunger, poverty. You even don't have to read the whole book because maybe it's enough if you have a discussion about climate change. Read chapter 3, it's 20 pages, and I guarantee you will win every discussion with every anti-capitalist. This is the reason. And so I hope you will buy the book.
It's out already, ya está publicado, ya está disponible en Unión Editorial y desde luego que es un manual imprescindible para entender las 10 grandes falacias del anticapitalismo con 10 respuestas contundentes a favor del libre mercado. Rainer Zitelmann, prácticamente 30 libros publicados, el autor alemán más vendido en los últimos años. Un lujo tenerla aquí en el Instituto Juan de Mariana y de visita en Madrid. Rainer, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for everything what you did for me. Yes.
Thank you. And ya sabéis, En defensa del libre mercado, un librazo de los mejores títulos de este 2023.